Okay, so we're going to do some activities today, guys. And those activities are going to be reflective on what you've done so far. So you've done a group project, obviously, so we're going to reflect a little bit on how you managed the project and how you guys performed as a group. I don't expect that you guys will be working in a group the way that an engineering team works in a group. Group work is something that you have to learn, and the only way you learn it is by doing it over and over and over again. And really, more important than that is the only way you learn from something is if you reflect on what you've just done. So it's no good just being in a group and carrying out your group work exactly the same every single time you do group work throughout the degree. Pick one of each. There we go. What you need to do is work out what you did well, work out what you did poorly, and do the poor parts better next time. And if you reflect on your group work every single time, then you'll get progressively better throughout the degree, okay? And that's what we want. Sorted? Very good. All right, so what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about that and a little bit about what we can actually do. The first thing that we're going to do is reflect on how you managed your project. So this sheet here, the one that looks like it's come straight out of an Excel spreadsheet, because it's come straight out of an Excel spreadsheet, is a Gantt chart. Or it's not a Gantt chart yet. At the moment it's a grid, but what you're going to do is turn that into a Gantt chart. Hands up who's heard of Gantt charts before. Okay, so some of you. Gantt charts are really, really good for managing time. We'll do a lecture on project management a little bit later in the semester, and one aspect of that will be Gantt charts, and there's some other alternatives for managing time and managing projects. But Gantt charts are excellent to try and plan what gets done when and interrelationships between different sections, for example. So I've got a couple of images. Here's one image that demonstrates one example of a Gantt chart. So the way it works is you've got tasks, so things you need to do. So on the sheet in front of you, you've got some of the things you actually did for this first project. So you defined the problem, so you probably had group discussions, you actually went and wrote some things, and then you wrote up your PDS at some point as well. All right, so those were activities you did. If you were building a bridge, you would be pouring footings and making, foundations and that kind of stuff. You'd be clearing land before that. You'd be doing different components all throughout the progress. And each one of those things takes a different amount of time, and you schedule them differently. You don't start pouring footing after you've done the road base on account of the road base has something to actually go on. There's a sequence that things need to work in. The same thing can be said for your group design. So we have our tasks down here, and they can be in any order, but generally you'll write them in the order that you will do them. You can have a section like this as start date, end date if you want exact details, but I've removed that from your sheet because it's just easier to just draw a bar. And then you draw a bar for however long it took you or is going to take you. So if we're doing this before a project, we're planning, all right, how long do I think that's going to take me? And you draw a line. If we're using it like we're using it now for reflection, then you should have a pretty good understanding of how long something took you. And so you'll be able to say, all right, we started at roughly this date and we finished at roughly this date, okay? And when we get to the end, we'll look at what it looks like. But each one of those activities that you highlight has to have a bar. And it can have a solid bar like that, or it can have, this is probably not going to work. Nope. You can do like a line. All right. Never mind. How about we do this? Document camera, there we go. All right, so when you actually fill this thing out, you can either just put a box like this and say, all right, I spent from Tuesday that week to Friday that week, and I'll fill that in. Or sometimes you'll see Gantt charts, you'll have sort of a start line and a finish line and just a single horizontal line between them like that. All right. Either of those two methods is fine, whatever you want to do. All right. I'm fairly flexible on the way the actual Gantt chart will be formatted. You'll work with these in companies, and sometimes they'll have a standard sort of layout that they like, or a spreadsheet or whatever. Here's another example of a Gantt chart. So even more projects here, and this time you've got some arrows that show dependencies. So obviously this one has to start after that one. So if this bar there, if I have that bar and it's taking whatever it's taking, maybe, I don't know, 10 days. If that bar there now accidentally, something's gone wrong, something didn't get delivered to site or whatever, it took 20 days, you can see every single thing under it that has an arrow of dependency, that all has to shift over by 10 days off to the right. And obviously that potentially could have significant impact on how much things are going to cost, how you actually manage the stuff, what sort of conversations you have with politicians who have promised things to be delivered for a certain time and they're paying your bills. So this sort of thing, oftentimes you need to keep checking it and make sure you're on track for your timelines, because if you're not, you need to decrease the time something's going to take or start having hard conversations with people about missing deadlines. All right? So, these are just a couple examples, and what you're going to do now is, just as a reflective process, you're going to think about what you've actually done over the last, however long, no, not that one, here we go. You're going to reflect on what you've done between week 2 and week 7, all right? So hopefully on Friday everyone's happy to be handing in their project. They should be, you guys, what did we say? I wanted 3 days of editing. Hands up who's editing. Some of you? Cool. All right, we're getting close. So this should be your time to be going over and over and over this document and make sure it's well written and you've got your bridging statements, so your introductions, your conclusions, all of that sort of stuff. So you should be squarely down, where are we? Right there. And we are week 7, so you should be something in this kind of an arrangement in week 7 for editing the report, yeah? Is everyone comfortable with that? All right, so what you're going to do now, think about what you did. I've written down the activities that you should have been doing, so hopefully that helps. And just put some little bars in this thing. It doesn't matter if you wrote your PDFs 2 days ago. I'm not collecting this. I'm not going to judge you. It's just a reflective process that you can say, all right, maybe that's not the ideal way to manage the project for project 2. All right, so be honest. Write down how long you spent on things and when you actually did them, and then we'll talk about it. And just to help, I might put the class schedule up here too. All right, there's the class schedule. Obviously, we did our research and brainstorming in Tute 3, bridge preliminary experimentation Tute 4 and so forth. So that gives you a little bit of a lineup for dates of when classes actually worked on things. So guys, in the grey rows are kind of the section headings, and then the white ones are the actual activities that you did. So it's sometimes common in Gantt charts. So if I have, say, that activity, this activity, and then another activity like this, it's sometimes common to bridge all of those like this in the summary column. Just so that if you collapsed all of the white parts and just looked at the section headings, you'd still have a pretty good understanding of where the project was carried out. All right, so those grey rows are summaries, they're the headings, they're kind of the whole part of that project, and then the white ones are the actual activities you did. And then, so if you do a bar in the grey, the bar in the grey should encapsulate the entire section. All right? Okay, in the interest of time, let's stop there. Some of you are getting pretty close to completing the whole thing. Some of you are struggling to remember what you did when. That's fine. I think what you should do is take this exercise and spend a little bit of time this afternoon, perhaps, in study time, just finishing this and reflecting on what you did when, because the purpose of this is to look at when you did things and think about, All right, is there a way I could be better in managing my project? So did you do things later that you would have much rather do early? Were there things that you realised were very helpful that you could have got done before doing testing and things like that? Was there certain amounts of the writing you could have got out of the way early such that you save yourself later in the game? All right, so this next project, project 2 on the centrifugal pump, I will not be holding your hand. Okay, so this has been a very, very guided process, this project. I've told you exactly what each section needs to be, roughly when you need to be working on each section. The next project, you guys are going to be managing that process independently. Okay, you guys are going to be doing that in your group. And if you don't have some amount of time management plan put into place, so an example would be a Gantt chart like this, you're going to really struggle towards the back of the semester because you're going to have a million things to do and you're going to have a very limited time to do it. Okay, so think about the way that you managed your time in the first project, how you can do it better, and learn from that on the next project such that you do it better. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? So this is part of our reflective process of learning. Everything you do, if you reflect on it at the end and try and be better next time, you will be better. Simple as that. All right, so that's what you did in your groups or what you did on the project, and hopefully what you produce for the next project will be better and you'll be happier and you get higher report marks and better writing and all of that. We'll do a lot of other reflection on your actual English language and report structure. So once Brent marks those, he'll give you his feedback and then we'll get Bridge to mark a selection of them. He'll give you a lecture on common things that he saw across the whole class, ways to do it better. And then if you guys look back on your English language lectures that we gave you, some of the techniques, and perhaps have a little bit more time in edit, then you guys can actually improve on that writing skills as well. So we're putting a lot of reflection in this subject for a really specific purpose because we want you guys to get better. Okay? Now, let's talk about group work. Hands up who loves group work. Yeah. All right, so you guys will have another 3.5 and a bit years of it. You guys need to get to a place where you're really functional in groups. And particularly when you are graduate engineers or even undergrads doing VAC-PRAC, you'll be put in groups with a bunch of people you don't know, a bunch of different work ethics, a bunch of different personalities and backgrounds and different stuff going on in their lives, and you'll have to be productive, otherwise you'll get sacked. Simple as that, yeah? So you need to work out how to actually do that. Now, I don't expect you guys to know very well how to do that now. You guys are very early in the learning process, but this is where we start, okay? Now, this is a diagram from this Tuckman guy. And I've looked and I haven't found anyone else using anything different other than these 4 phrases to describe the process of group work. Forming, storming, norming and performing. Sort of feel like I'm on The Office when I'm talking about this, but this effectively sums up the way groups form and then behave. Okay? So can you think of roughly how long it took you guys to get each other's contact details, get to know each other, actually be able to make a group meeting and keep it? How long did that take initially? A couple of days? A week? Longer? All right, so that should be the first 5 minutes. You should get everything you need to know. Think back about what you did and didn't get in terms of information on your group members. And then the next group project that you do, which will be project 2, make sure every single one of the details that you didn't get but thought you need, for example, mobile phone numbers, make sure you get that, okay? We'll be reforming groups and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Storming. Who's still in the storming phase? Some? So storming's basically trying to work out the team dynamic and how you work and how they work, and just because you like spending 40 hours a day on EG1000 doesn't mean everyone else likes spending 40 hours a day on EG1000, that kind of stuff. So you're working out your group dynamic, who's able to do what, how that works. There's sometimes aggro involved, there's sometimes lots of aggro involved, but the objective is to get through this phase as quickly as is humanly possible and get to norming. All right, so now we're actually starting to get comfortable working with our teammates, and we understand that the way they work and the way we work and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, performing is you actually get stuff done. Okay? So this is roughly the stages that you will go through in every single group that you ever form, assuming that you haven't worked a bunch of times before. Our objective is to get to step 4 as quickly as possible. All right? Get through all of that other stuff that doesn't actually do anything useful for us and get to that performing stage. All right? So if you're thinking about the way your group works and the way your meetings operate and all of that kind of stuff, and you get that buttoned up right at the very beginning, that's going to streamline the whole process. All right, so as I've been saying, this isn't something that you're just inherently gifted with. This is something that you have to learn, and the only way you learn is to do it over and over and over again and think about what you did wrong and what you did right. Here's a couple of points, and then I'll talk about some group meetings. You cannot control your teammates. No matter how hard you try, you cannot control your teammates. This is not about control, and it's not about making everyone else do exactly the same thing as what you're going to be doing. If you want to work 15 hours tomorrow and the next day, other people might not have that amount of time. What you need to do is plan your time wisely right at the very beginning, Gantt chart for example, and work out what time everyone does have available and when they intend to operate on a project. Okay? So I've kind of just dropped you in the deep end in the first project so that you have bad experience and then ideally improve and have good experience for this one. But you need to plan who can do what, when, and how. All right, the only way to succeed is communicate well. Who's had issues with communication, not been able to get on to people, not had people get back to them, not organised meetings or organised meetings and people not rock up and that kind of stuff? It'll basically happen every single group you're ever in, all right? There will always be someone that can't make a meeting or won't reply to a phone call or whatever, all right? You just need to work around that, and you need to build a bit of padding into your timeline such that you can address that. Agree on defined deliverables and delivery date at each meeting. How many of you, every single meeting, you had exact deliverables and a date that they were delivered by? Did you track that? Did you write it down? Write it on minutes or anything like that? That will help your group dynamic significantly. Writing things down, it's a very simple thing to do, but as soon as you write something down and it's there for everyone to look at, then you sit down at your next meeting and the first thing you do is go through the actions from the last meeting and you say, all right, John, have you done this? Bob, have you done that? And instead of you guys being the big bad guy saying, why haven't you done it? You said you'd do it and things like that. It's there on paper. It should be each person's responsibility to rock up and take control of their section and say, I have done this or I haven't done that or whatever. All right? So it actually takes a little bit of the fight or the aggro out of a group meeting to do that. As I said, expect that group members will underperform and build this into your timeline. So give everyone about 25% extra time to have a flat battery or get called into work or whatever. These things happen. You guys are doing 400 different things at once. You're working and you've got social life and you've got uni and technically you've got 4 different subjects in uni and all sorts of things happen. Try and be empathetic to everyone else's different circumstance and build that into your timeline. And sometimes there's no way to avoid picking up someone's slack. There just isn't. Sometimes there's just going to be people that don't pull their weight and you're just going to have to deal with it. Ideally, if you can catch that early and you can motivate them to be involved, then that won't be the case. But in every single job, there's always going to be the person that doesn't carry their weight. And in university, you can rely on them getting low marks. In the workplace, you can hope that maybe they get sacked and you don't have to deal with them. But that's basically it. You just have to work productively until that point, and that's not your call. So you have to make it work, all right? And you have to be as empathetic to everyone as humanly possible and try and bring them along and motivate them. If you're the one doing all the work, then it's your job to try and motivate the other people because you've got a little bit more time perhaps to devote to it, or you're a little bit keener to get a high mark, all right? And for goodness sake, don't be the person whose slack has to be picked up, all right? So don't be the person that's coming to meetings and not delivering what you're asked for. All right, So, a lot of this can be managed in meetings. The only real interaction that you guys have with each other is in the meetings, aside from like Facebook and messages and emails with content and that kind of stuff. But the group meetings are where the group work actually happens. All right? Group meeting isn't something you just organise, we'll just rock up at 4 and just have a quick chat about it over in the Undercroft. A group meeting, if you structure it, can be a very, very productive aspect of your project work. And the next couple of slides, I've got some different things and ways to manage your group meeting. And I'd like you to at least try this for Project 2. All right, have a couple of group meetings and plan them this way. It'll take a little bit more time to actually organise and document and that kind of stuff. But hopefully after a couple of these, you'll start to see the real benefit, because literally every meeting that you ever go to as a graduate engineer, these things will be happening. Okay? You'll have minutes, you'll have people documenting it, you'll have someone leading the meeting, all of that kind of stuff. Every meeting has these features. If you start doing it now, you'll get comfortable with that and you'll realise why every meeting has these features. All right? You know, you don't just rock up and just start talking random stuff as a professional. Let's start being professionals as university students. All right? So, first thing, steps that should be taken before a meeting happens. All right? So let's assume that we've planned a meeting for 4 o'clock today or something. Plan the meeting carefully. Who's going to go? What are you going to talk about? When is it going to be? Where is it going to be? Why are you meeting? And potentially how many meetings are you going to have? So let's say we're having a meeting this afternoon. Is everyone going to be there? Can everyone be there? If not, are we going to run it anyway and then catch the person up? Now obviously you don't want the person missing if they've got work or something for every single meeting, but you can afford with 5 in your group to have one person miss a meeting and then catch them up with the meeting minutes, so long as they're at the next meeting and that kind of thing. Okay, so you can be flexible, I don't mind about that, but plan the meeting carefully. Prepare and send out an agenda identifying issues to be discussed so that everyone gets to that meeting and they're familiar with what's going on. Generally speaking, the first agenda item will be business from the last meeting or action items from the last meeting. All right, so what did we say you need to do? What did you actually do? And if you send that out a day before the meeting, people look at it and go, oh shit, I said I was going to do this and I didn't do it. And they, hopefully, if they give a shit, they'll rush and get it done by the meeting. Okay? So that's the first thing on the agenda. And then what are you going to talk about? What's the new things we have to do? Just a list. It takes a couple of seconds to put in an email, but if you put an agenda in an email rather than just say, hey, let's have a meeting, everyone's on the same page when they get there and you don't waste 15 minutes working out what you need to do. Set up a meeting room and send out any background information. So if you guys said you were going to do a part of a report, send it to everyone beforehand so that they can look at it before the meeting, that kind of stuff. So just be a little bit kind of proactive about it, and the more proactive you are about group meetings, the more productive the actual hour that you can all be in the one room can be. You can do a lot of the stuff that you do in the first half hour of a group meeting not in the group meeting. You can do that beforehand, all right? And if you do that beforehand, then all 5 of you who have different lives and different work and different stuff going on can get that done well and then use that one time that you find to meet with each other really productively. If you're wasting that 1 hour window that you have a week where everyone's got the same schedule, then you're not going to be as productive. Okay, how do we run a meeting? Start on time. Pretty fundamental. If you can't make a meeting as early as possible, and I'm not talking we've got a 4 o'clock meeting, so at 2 minutes to 4 send a text message. I'm talking if you know or even think that you're going to be late any amount of time before that meeting, you let everyone know the second you think that you're going to be late or not come. All right? Because if 3 people send messages saying I can't come and there's 2 people left and they've got other stuff to do, that gives them the time to reorganise and do something different. They don't want to rock up, waste an hour waiting for you and then have nothing happen. Okay? So be courteous to each other's lives. I keep saying it. Be empathetic. Understand that everyone's just trying to fight their own battle. All right? And you guys have to respect each other, and if you respect each other, they'll respect you and you'll be good. Okay? So start on time, or at least let everyone know as soon as you're not going to turn up. Make introductions to group members, so that's not really applicable here, but if you're going to have a group, bigger group meeting with, people you don't know, then obviously the first thing you do is introduce everyone. Clearly define roles, and I'll talk about roles in a second, but who's doing what? Who's running the meeting? Who's taking the minutes? Who took minutes of group meetings at all semester, at all? Anyone? A couple of people? All right. Another thing that I really want you guys to try in the second project is taking minutes, just dot points. Or use your iPhone. iPhone has, you can just voice record. Stick it in the center of the table, voice record, write down a couple of dot points. That's enough. Send it to everyone, such that everyone, if there was something important said and you want that detail, you can go back and look at it, okay? Review, revise, and order the agenda. So go through the agenda that you sent out and actually do those dot points the way that you sent them out. Set clear time limits for the meeting. Review action items from previous meeting, like I said, and then focus on one issue at a time. So sequence through that agenda, okay? And then as you get to the end of the meeting and planning for the next meeting, that's what you do at the end of the meeting. You don't just walk away not having organised the next time you meet. So the first thing you do is record final decisions or actions to be taken. So this is starting to be the action items for the next meeting. So what is each person doing? Assign tasks to each person, set deadlines for those tasks. So agree on how long it should take, how long they have available, and when you think that they'll get it back. And please, please, please be honest with how long you think that you're going to take to do a task, and maybe add a bit of padding in that. If you think it might take you 4 hours and you only have 2 hours in the next week, then maybe say that. Maybe you need more help or something like that. Evaluate the meeting. So spend 2 minutes just saying how effective that meeting was when everyone was there. All right, it's no good going away and bitching about how useless that meeting was. If the meeting hasn't been productive, discuss why at the end of the meeting with the people that can actually do something about it. All right? So meetings are just as important as anything else, and feedback and reflection on the way that the meeting works. So if the meeting didn't work the way I'm suggesting it, talk about it at the end, come up with a better idea. Do a quick Google search on how to run an engineering meeting. There's about 100 web pages that'll tell you some different thing to me. So have a bit of reflection there. Close the meeting and prepare, whatever you're sending out to the group. So that might be the minutes or the recording or, a list of things everyone wants to do. So that's the last thing you do at the meeting. All right, so this is very structured. We were talking about systematic approaches to engineering design, and you get better design as a result of that. We can have systematic approaches to group work, and you will get better results. Okay? So try and put these things into practice. All right, I've got a couple of slides left, and then we're going to, what are we going to do? Oh, let's do a group work reflection before I do that. So your second sheet. All right, let's spend a couple of minutes. Now, I've talked a little bit about the way we run meetings and the way you run groups. This is a really good thing to reflect on what you've actually done in groups so far. All right, so there's a bunch of questions. I think I've highlighted in bold the couple that I want you to look at first. But you can complete a form like this at the end of each group work activity or group work project, and that should help you to actually improve the way you're going. So go through these for about 5 minutes, write a couple of comments on each of them, and then we'll have a quick chat. Okay, so hopefully you've put a little bit of information in at least a couple of those. If you haven't finished it, I suggest you finish that sometime later this week. This is a very useful activity to do. So what is the major advantage of working in a group? Is it just because I like annoying you guys? Or making your life difficult? Hopefully not. Hopefully you guys are really enjoying group work. What's the major advantage of doing it? Yeah. So you can basically achieve things in parallel. I mean, the major thing is you've got 5 people. Ideally, you should be able to get 5 people's worth of work on this project. All right? So hopefully what you submit to me as a group design report from 5 people will be far better than what you could have submitted if you were just by yourself. That'll get more and more evident as you move along, because the first project was pretty simple. But as projects get more complex, you need to do more research, more modelling, more aspects of analysis, then you will need the more people. It's basically just spreading the workload, hopefully. So anything like that. What was the greatest limitation that prevented your group achieving a greater outcome? Does anyone have any examples they'd like to share, or is it more personal? Limitations? Probably people's available time. Miscommunication, that's a really common one. So actually communicating clearly and understanding what each other have said, understanding what's expected in terms of group meetings and that kind of stuff. Communication is almost always the first one that I see in these groups. But, you know, having schedules that don't meet up is a common one as well. Having different expectations of what you want to get out of it. Some people want high marks, some people are happy with passes. That can cause different group dynamics. All right, what else have we got? Has anyone got to the back yet? Was there an example where your group could have communicated better? All right, was there a miscommunication? Was there a point where you didn't know where your group members were? Did you not have their phone numbers? That kind of stuff. How can you do that better? Hands up who likes working in a group. Have I already asked this? Yeah-ish. Hopefully by the time you get to fourth year, you'll like working in a group. Yeah? In the meantime, try to enjoy it as much as you can. If there's something that's really getting you, that's making you really annoyed about group work, just take a step back and try and get a bit of perspective on it. That empathy will actually take away a lot of the aggro that I was talking about. So if you're getting really angry at a group member or something like that, take a step back, think about, you know, everyone's got their own battles to fight. What are they doing in their life? It's only a single, what is it worth? 7.5% and then 10% for the report. EG1000 is a first year subject that by the time you get to fourth year is basically meaningless for your GPA. I didn't just say that, you all want high HDs and stuff, but effectively this subject doesn't mean anything by the time you get to fourth year. None of them do, other than if you start failing maths subjects. So just take a bit of perspective on the importance of what you're doing. We love it, it's great, and you guys are learning something from it, but it's only one subject in a giant big picture of, you know, what is your university education. It's not the end of the world, okay? So take some perspective on it, and hopefully that takes a little bit of the stress away from what is group work, okay? On this next group work project, you guys will be filling out a timesheet anyway, so if someone's not rocking up, they don't get marks. Easy as that. Whether or not that motivates them to rock up or just makes you happier that you're not losing your marks to their apathy or whatever. Either way. What was the last one? If you were going to embark on a new group project tomorrow, and technically you're embarking on a new group project on Monday, what would you do better? What would you do better? That's probably the most important one to think about in the next week. What would you do better in your group, or in the way that you acted, or the way that you manage group meetings? What could you do better to be better and have a better outcome? All right, so I'll leave those for you to think about, but please go through that. And at the end of the next project, you guys will be in holidays and things like that. Think about that as well. All right? I think the last thing I wanted to talk about is the actual role of a facilitator in that group meeting. And I think there's the tendency to think that the facilitator is the person that stands up and says, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this design, this is the design I like, does anyone disagree? No? All right, let's go. That is not a leader. That is bossy boots, basically. That is just someone getting up and being the loudest person in the room, okay? That's not facilitating, that's not leading in the context of engineering. And now that's probably what you guys have had for, you know, the experiences you've had in high school and any other number of things, and most group work actually end up going to that. But what a facilitator actually does, and the role of the person that takes leadership in the meeting, and the reason that I want you to rotate this through all of the different people in your group, is that the facilitator's job is to get the best out of everyone else. Okay? If you take that leadership role, your sole objective, in my opinion, is to try and get the best out of the other group members, encourage participation, try and evolve someone else's idea. So if someone comes up with an idea, probe them about it and try and work on it with them. So you as a leader, the best thing that you can do is get more out of your team because the whole team lifts. That's excellent leadership. Okay? You can try and manage the way that the meeting works, and if someone's doing a lot of speaking, you can very politely say, oh, how about we hear from someone else or something like that. You can keep the group focused, so it's on you to, if we start talking about the pub on the weekend, say, look, I'm super happy to talk about that in 45 minutes, but let's just get a productive hour out because this is the only time we have to meet. You can delegate roles and tasks for the next meeting, provide feedback and guide feedback, and largely that structure that I talked about for the meeting, you're maintaining that structure, you're managing that structure and making sure everyone's on track, all right? But fundamentally, I want you to try, as a leader of that meeting, to look at everyone else rather than your ideas. Even if you've got really great ideas, maybe the next meeting, or you can certainly share them at a different opportunity, but that leadership should be trying to get everyone else's idea out. Because everyone has value, everyone has great ideas, and if someone else says an idea, that might actually spark something in you as well. And you might get further on in your design thinking as a result of it. But if you, as a leader, think it's your job to put everything on the table and just do all the talking, you're not going to have a productive group meeting, okay? And there's all sorts of ranges between that, but I just wanted to put that out there, the idea that a leader isn't necessarily just the loudest one, it's the person that cares about everyone else's ideas the most, okay? And note taker or, person who takes the minutes. Those are the two most important roles that I want you to try. All right, the last thing that I'll talk about, this is the last thing that I have. Reflection is for personal growth. So the purpose of reflection is to try and improve, the way that you are as an engineer. I don't think I need to talk too much about that stuff. The major thing is that you guys will be able to get job interview stuff out of this. All right? So employers want people that are able to function in diverse teams. If you are an engineer and you go out into a mine or refinery, experiences, maybe not so much recently. I think recent years engineers are starting to behave a bit better and have a better name. But 10 years ago, you'd go out to a mine and you'd be put in charge of 10 or 15 tradesmen and they'd have hundreds of years experience between them and they'd probably hate you just on principle as an engineer. You're just an engineer. The reason that they did that is not because they're dicks. It's because every single young green engineer, 1 year of experience under their belt, pops out and starts thinking they can reinvent the world and starts bossing people around and saying, this is how we're going to do it. They did it that way 5 years ago. It didn't work. But you didn't ask them that. You just started bossing them around and telling them to do that. So they're quite happy to watch you fail, and that's why they have a bad opinion of engineers, because engineers come out and instead of being consultative and actually talking and really valuing the people in their group, the people with trades, the people with those hundreds of years of experience between them, you just come out and start bossing them around and they're going to watch you fail and enjoy it, all right? So that's why there's been a negative opinion about engineers. We're trying to buck that trend. You guys are going to go out there and you're going to be excellent engineers and you're going to use every single person that you have as a resource, and that's how you're going to talk about group work, all right? So even in the face of someone that doesn't want to work with you or is happy to watch you fail, if you can get productive work out of them, that's an excellent career trait. All right? And so that's where we're getting. So even in the face of EG1000 group work that goes to hell, you can somehow frame that as something you can talk about in a job interview, because people are much more, or employers are much more interested in employing you if you're able to deal with adversity and group situations where, the people might not necessarily be all HD students, but you're able to get the best out of it anyway. All right, so have a bit of reflection and try and start portfolioing the way that your group works. And I'll talk more about portfolios in a couple of weeks, I think. But otherwise, that's what I got for you today. Cheers, guys.